Three basic settings on a manual camera to start shooting, and they're all really, really easy. The first setting we're going to talk about is your shutter speed. This is something that makes a big difference in an exposure and how it looks. They range from 1/8,000th of a second all the way to 30 seconds or a bulb exposure. The bulb exposure is pressing the shutter and for as long as you want to press that shutter and then releasing the shutter, and it is open until you decide to close it. That's a fun one for later. To illustrate the differences, I took pictures of a flag blowing in the wind on a windy day. The first one here is 1/8,000th of a second. It is a very, very small slice of time. And the flag did not have time in that 8,000th of a second to move much. And so it's a beautiful, crisp photo because it's such a small slice. This next photo here is that same flag, but it shows that it's blowing because I used a much longer shutter. This one's 1/3 of a second, and so that there was definitely time for that flag to move around and blur a bit and show movement, which is beautifully illustrated there. The shutter speed is a fun setting because it allows different amounts of time and therefore different amounts of light to reach through onto the capture surface. The next one we'll talk about is aperture. And aperture is how big or small the opening is allowing light through onto the capture surface. They range from about 1.4 to 32 or occasionally 64 depending on your lens. The examples I have here are a 2.8 aperture or a 1.4 is going to be a really big opening. It's going to allow a lot of light through onto the surface. A 32 aperture is going to be closed really down, almost to a pinprick, to not allow much light through onto the surface. And the contrast of these is a really large opening. It lets more light in, but it also really narrows the slice of the photograph that is in focus. Here I have an illustration of this row of orbs here. If you notice, only the first one is in focus. This is at a 2.8 aperture, and this one shows only that first ball and maybe not even the entire first ball in focus, and the rest is kind of blurred away. It's really highlighting that very first ball and showing this is the point of this photo, this is the focal point. Or you can focus on this next one, which is the green ball, so you can draw the eye into the photo a little bit more. Or in this very last one here, the white ball at the end is the one that's in focus, which brings the eye all the way to the back of the photograph, showing, hey, this is not what I want you to look at here, come look way back here. You know, because that shows you, hey, I want you to look here. Having a smaller aperture down to the f32, here I illustrate, if you notice, it's focused on the red ball, but the rest of it is in better focus as well because that depth of field is much larger. So it's showing much more of a slice of the photograph that is closer to in focus. Now, something to keep in mind with aperture is it is also dependent on how close you are to your subject. In the case of these orbs, I was very close, which means my depth of field on these is not going to be as large of a slice of the photograph, even if I have my aperture all the way down to 32, because I'm close enough to it that it's closed down. If I were further away from it, all of these orbs and then more could potentially be in focus if I use that f32 because I'm further away from it, which just allows a larger slice of your photograph to be in focus. The third thing is your ISO. That is your camera's sensitivity to light. They range from 100 ISO, which is very little sensitivity to light, all the way to 25,600, which is a lot of light sensitivity. The ISO 100 is going to show incredibly crisp pixels. It's going to be just beautiful depth, crisp pixels, gorgeous to look at. The ISO 25,600 is going to show a lot more graininess in the photo. It picks up any tiny little bit of lint that's in there, and is more likely to show those things, because anything that glistens the tiniest bit of light will be shown when you have a higher ISO or more sensitivity to light. In this shot here, I have a bubble orb surrounded by black to illustrate that this one is done at ISO 100 to show all that beautiful crisp depth that's in there when it has less light sensitivity. In contrast to this next shot, this one I shot at the highest light sensitivity to illustrate the difference, and this one, it is not as crisp. It is not, like, the colors are a bit, like, the lines are a bit more flooded. So it just doesn't have the same crispness to it. Now, it depends on what your goal is for the shot. There are absolutely applications where one might want a higher ISO, more sensitivity. An example here is if you have a really dark set, if you have a dark situation and you don't have a tripod with you, so you need to have as fast a shutter as you can, even in a darker situation, you can put your ISO up as high as you can get it at the 25,600, and then it is more likely that you can actually capture an image because you have that sensitivity, which compensates for the shutter needing to be a bit fast. And maybe your aperture, maybe you've got to have it at a certain point. You've got to have it at maybe an 11 or a 16 to get everything you want in focus, because your slice of your photograph, you may need a whole person in focus in a darker situation, and that's a time when you would want that higher sensitivity to light to make sure that you actually get an exposure. All of these settings play off of each other, whether you want to show a very small slice of a photograph or a very large slice, a very big depth of field. You change your aperture around depending on what you want to illustrate and what you want to highlight in your photo. If you want crisp pixels or if you want to show movement, you change your shutter speed. You go from a very fast 1/8,000th of a second to all the way to a few seconds, depending on how much movement, if any, you want to illustrate in a photo. And then if you want crisp pixels and crisp lines with your light, or if you want beautiful flooding with your light, as is illustrated by the bubble ball, that's where you play with your ISO. A lower ISO is going to give you much crisper lines, and a higher ISO is going to give you flooding and just beautiful clouds around all of the light sources. Thank you so much for watching. If you got anything at all out of this video, please hit the like button and subscribe. If you'd like to see an example where I made a starburst with this bubble ball, please hit the link below. It's a really fun technique called telescoping, which I explain in that video. And as always, keep being amazing.